So perhaps we'll give it a minute or two just to let people in, but I'm hoping that as we start a conversation, then I'm looking forward to this.
I am as well. This has been a challenging year, challenging few years, to be honest. And so this conversation, I know is gonna do me well.
Mhm. And one of the things I think as we were thinking about how to start this, it was because recognizing that, yes, we both have been through a lot. Really, everybody has been through a lot in the last couple of years. And I think one of the things is that we want to get back to what we consider normal. So I think there's a push, not only in schools, but kind of in the world at large. I would imagine your institution, I know that my institution as well, but also just in general, there's this push to kind of go back to the way we were, even though I know we want to acknowledge that a lot has gone on over the last 2 to 3 years. And it's like, well, what does that look like? And how can we move forward, but also kind of give some acknowledgement and credence to the fact that a lot went down and continue to go down. And somehow thinking that the way, that the avenue is the way back. And I'm not sure we're going to go back to kind of pre-pandemic, pre-social unrest, whatever. What I think is, for me, the conversation is, how do we go forward? How we go forward, building on and learning from what has happened. How did it, change us, make us aware? And, what can we do to support other people's journey in terms of moving forward? And so, I know we want it to be, I think that's a genuine effort of like it being the way it was, but I'm not sure it's going to go back to being the way it was. And actually, perhaps we need to hold space for it. That's okay. Like, in fact, maybe it's okay that we not move back, that we actually begin from where we are. Because I think for many of us, it really was kind of an awakening, and a way of looking at things differently.
I love it, and you really just brought us right on in. That was a better introduction than I was planning on doing. But I want to welcome everyone to our Deep Equity Now series. This is our second year in collaboration with Toro, New York. So I'm always appreciative of my partner, Dr. Velma Cobb, who is with us today. And this is our third year since, we began doing this type of work when the series, when the pandemic hit, and we came into that fall with the renewed sense of wanting to do something to respond to a lot of the social unrest that we were seeing happening in our country. I want to just start us off with a brief introduction, and then we'll jump into introducing our panelists here. But when we were thinking about what did we want to do for our series this year, ever since I bought a farm in 2021, my mind has been on gardening, right? And one of the things that I have been learning that I really didn't have any idea about before I started gardening is that when you grow crops, what you grow depletes the soil. Mm-hmm. And every so often you have to rotate crops and you have to do things to the soil to replenish the nutrients that the plants are taking from it, because if you don't, pretty soon you will start to see a decrease in the yield that is produced over time. And I began to think about the ways in which that is likened to the work that we do. I believe all of us are trees that are planted in good soil. We are producing fruits that we are nourishing people and communities with. But the question then becomes, when the soil becomes depleted, how do we get the nutrients back in so that the fruit we're producing is just as abundant and just as nourishing as it was when we first began? And that's really where this series focus comes from this year, Deep Equity Now, finding rest, recuperation, and rejuvenation. How do we replenish ourselves so that the fruit we produce continues to nourish and edify the people and the communities that we have been given to serve? And so with that, today's focus is looking at educators. We have two amazing educators that are with us today. I'm gonna go ahead and introduce Dr. Kiana O'Leary, and then I'm gonna turn it over to Dr. Cobb, because I know she has a dynamic introduction for Dr. Lightsey. I'm gonna give you the professional, and then I'm gonna give you the personal for Dr. O'Leary. The personal is Dr. O'Leary and I started working together a few years ago. And when I first started working with her, I thought she was the most dynamic and intimidating principal I've ever met in my life. I didn't want to say the wrong word. I was saying yes with the S and not yeah, because I was afraid she was gonna correct me. I said, man, I gotta really be a PhD around Dr. O'Leary. But as I got to know her, I realized just how amazing of an educator she is. Just how amazing she was at not only leading schools, but leading communities, right? She really embodied what the African-American principal was pre-Board of Education, which is someone who was more than just a leader of their school, but someone who was a leader of their community, interacting with students and families, not only at school, but at the grocery store, at the local Walmart, at church, wherever her students were, she was bound to be found. And so Dr. O'Leary is a California native and has extensive experience in PK through 12 administration, working in traditional public and charter school settings. After earning her master's in educational administration from the University of California, Los Angeles, Dr. O'Leary quickly gained a reputation for starting and transforming schools in the greater Los Angeles area. She continues to dedicate her work in school transformation by mentoring school principals and teachers. Her years of school leadership service has founded 2 schools in Los Angeles, 2 educational nonprofits. She has piloted district-wide equity initiatives and has mentored dozens of college-bound minority students. Her research interest in equity education and school leadership has helped her understand unique perspectives of BIPOC students' needs and how inaccessible quality, culturally competent curriculum is for inner city students. She has presented her research on college access for students of color, building pathways for women in school leadership roles, critical analysis of race in school, and how to address tech equity in the K through 12 landscape. She has recently published her first book titled Lead with Truth: How to Make a Difference in Your School, Your Life, and the Lives of Your Students. So, Dr. O'Leary, we thank you for being on the panel with us today.
It is definitely a pleasure to be here, and I celebrate this opportunity. Happy Women Awareness Month to my colleagues who are also panelists. And thank you, Dr. Ananuju, for this opportunity. I look forward to having a courageous conversation about equity and where do we go with it from here on out.
Mhm. Well, thank you. My name is Velma Cobb, and I direct the Landry Center of Educational Research at the Touro University here in New York, the Lander Center for Educational Research in the Graduate School of Education. I want to introduce an administrator, a veteran, a public educator for more than 40 years, Paula A. Lightsey, and really with 18 years in school leadership. She presently serves as a district supervisor. She believes in the social and emotional competencies have to be met with fidelity in order to prepare students and adults for success. Before accepting her administrative position, her first one, she served as a classroom teacher, educational consultant, and a counselor. The previous positions strengthened and readied her knowledge base to holistically serve diverse students and staff population. Building community is one of her gifts, and initiating the practice of mindfulness district-wide is one of her many talents. She sees the strategies and practices of mindfulness as the path to self-awareness, self-management, and she is a certified mindfulness facilitator, a yoga and social emotional learning facilitator, with degrees as an educational specialist, administrator, and supervisor from Wayne State University, the master's in arts and guidance and counseling from Eastern Michigan University, and also a longtime New Jersey person, having lived there also. Now, I've known Paula for a few years, and actually I call her my tribe. We met through the Transformation Educational Leadership Project, which was a program over a year in which leaders from across the country came together to really look at this intersection of leadership, equity, and social emotional learning. And how do we put those things together? And one of the things that I will tell you is, as a leader and as a person who brings community together, she has done that, I would say, not only in Michigan, and she's with the Southfield Public Schools in Michigan, but also I've seen her do this work across really diverse audiences, within our TEL community, but also beyond. And so I really do appreciate that she is here and joining this conversation. And I appreciate that what we continue to do with this series is like bringing this kind of East Coast, West Coast together in terms of a conversation. And so, Paula, thank you. I welcome you.
Thank you. This is really an honor and a privilege. And I have to catch my breath. I'm breathing and squeezing my ball. It's not really a stress ball for me, but it just gives me comfort. And so thank you. The work is real. The work is personal for me. And so I'm here to serve.
Now, when we started, I said, you know what? I want to open up the session, and I know we're going to get started with the session, but people are always rushing because that's what we do. We got so much to do. And so I just want to take a moment for people to arrive by just taking us back to the constant of our breath and our understanding that our breath, which means life, but it also is a way in which we can monitor our parasympathetic nervous system and just bring us back to a place of just, a kind of quietness, intention, and what we want out of this conversation. And so if you would, I'm going to ask people in the audience, but also the four of us, if we could just take for a moment, perhaps put your hand on your heart and one hand on your stomach, and take 3 deep cleansing breaths. Thank you. I really appreciate you are working and coming together around this. I think it's important. One of the conversation that we began with is, we've been, just racing, and we look to knowing that our students are experiencing more mental health issues. And I always say to people, I go, you know what? Those children actually grow up, and some of them become educators. They also become lawyers and other professions. But we assume that somehow this social and emotional learning is just for young people. And I would say it's for us as well. And so my first question, and really, Gioma, just jump right on in, is again, as we got started, is I know that we want to think of whatever happened during the pandemic and during the social unrest is over. But there's plenty of contextual things that are going on that tell us that it's not. And also, even if they were not happening in kind of the society at large, we are experiencing the kind of unrest in our bodies that says we need to move forward. We're not going to go back to the way things were pre-pandemic. So how do we do this and embrace that we each need to rejuvenate, recuperate, and actually, quite frankly, heal? So I give that to our panelists. As you tell us more about what you do, just tell us, how do we do that? Look forward.
Would you like to start, or how would you like us to start? Who would like to go first?
Go ahead.
Certainly. So as I have transitioned from the K-12 setting and even from higher ed, and now working full-time as a consultant for the TK through 12 landscape, one thing that I'm learning as I'm working with principals and working with teachers, primarily my work is with school leaders, it's really just this idea of acknowledgement. Mm-hmm. And oftentimes, because we have, we as a people of color, we come from fabric of resilience. And so we have learned within our community how to suppress our feelings, how to suppress our emotions, how to suppress our trauma. And what I love about this generation of young people who are beginning to tap into the workforce, beginning to make their imprint in society, is that they are at this point where it's no longer are we just going to suppress the issues that we contend with, but we are going to just acknowledge that I am experiencing mental health challenges. And we see that with, Osaka playing tennis, saying like, no, I want to acknowledge that I am struggling right now, and I'm going to take some time away from the tennis court, right? We see this across the nation, that there are people who are saying no to moving through trauma as normal. And so I think the first thing is for us to come to this place of acknowledgement. And in that acknowledgement, really understanding that we don't have answers. This is all something that we have all experienced at the same time. Prior to the pandemic, we don't have anything to even compare this to, right? Where the whole world was shut down for 18 months inside of homes and watching some of the social unrest that was happening and really experiencing, contending with, processing that this is real and we no longer can ignore it. We see that these microaggressions, these macroaggressions are real, how they're really impacting our society. And people wanted to do something and they wanted to speak up. And so I think it's acknowledging that there is a challenge, and then having a table large and wide enough for a diverse group of folks to come to the table and say, for this organization, for this school, for this community, for this body of people, what do we do differently? And let's hear from everyone so we can come together as a collective to begin to sort out some resolve. And once we begin to do that, I think we can begin the process of change. But if we continue to do things like we've done in the past, we'll just continue to have the same results that we've experienced. And so if we want change, we must first be the change we want to see. And so that's what I have for us at this time.
So there were so many pieces and words I wanted to jot down that you were sharing, and that first acknowledgement. And so in Southfield, we're a K-8 district, predominantly people of color, and there's a lot of injury and harm and sadness. And I know that it's important to be politically correct. You know, you don't want to share your dirty laundry. But I can tell you many of our babies are angry. And so in acknowledging where they are, the question for me has been, why is it okay? And so giving them something to maul around in. And so then I go into, I believe mindfulness is a healer. And I know for many it's a catchphrase maybe, but it's been around for a long time. And I watch the wonders of it and the work. And I'm watching little babies, though, that are so much more compassionate with others and themselves. And so we're just embracing it as a district. And you know, not everybody buys it. And I don't want to be a pusher, but I am. But it is difficult to stand by knowing that your breath is life. And if there's a simple tool that you can use to help and support you from the inside out, why wouldn't that be important to you? And so that's, you know, when we think about what can we do, and we don't have the answers, but there are little things that we can do.
Dr. O'Leary knows that I love James Baldwin. He is one of my favorite people to go to. 1963, he gave a talk to teachers, and in his opening stanza, he says that for those of us who work with the minds of our young people, we got to be prepared to go for broke. But it occurs to me that in the process of going for broke, you oftentimes end up broken. You oftentimes end up depleted because you give your all to what you are doing. And so I was hoping you both could talk to us about when you do go for broke, how do you come back? How do you recover from, I just gave my all to this student or to this family or to this city? How do you recover? Because the work, unfortunately, doesn't take into consideration our brokenness sometimes. And so I just wanted to know, how do you all deal with situations like that?
I can share a little bit. One moment at a time. And I hate to sound like it's so simple, because it's not, but it is one moment at a time, because no one is pouring. Well, that's not true. I do have my tribe, and I do have family that pours into me, but I also know what I need, or I'm figuring out every day and every moment what I need in that moment. That's the recovery. And then you lay down. and being self-aware is so powerful, because there are moments that you feel depleted, and you know you've done good work. You know you've ushered someone forward, or maybe you think you did good work and can't tell whether you ushered someone forward, and you're hoping to find out on the other side. And often as educators, that's what happens. You may not even know in the moment that you're doing it, but 5 years, 10 years down the line, you see one of your students or a staff member, and so you know your work was not in vain. But one moment at a time.
I really appreciate that. That's something that I try to live by. I say I'm just taking 24 hours at a time. I'm just going 24 hours at a time. But I would say for me, I had to do many things. And there was a place in my career that I came to. It came to a head where I was broken and I was depleted. And when you get tired of being tired, you then look for solutions so that you can have that sense of rejuvenation, replenishing, and restoration. And so for me, I got tired of being tired and I needed to get back to my core values. Like, who am I at the core being of myself? And in that discovery, in that journey of getting back to Kiana, I learned that I needed therapy. And it was okay. It wasn't taboo for a Black woman to seek professional support with a counselor. And those therapy sessions were phenomenal for me. And having someone who is from looking at my life from the outside in and being able to make sense of my life and give me suggestions and tips and tools on how to get back to purpose and to core value. I go to church. I'm a faith believer. So, getting my sense of restoration on Sundays. Now I volunteer in Sunday school, so I have to say, hey, I can't do all 4 Sundays in Sunday school. I can teach 2 Sundays, but then 2 Sundays, let me just be a worshiper and let me just enjoy the moment of having the minister pour into my soul, right? And then exercising. Like, I really invested in a professional trainer to say, like, hey, I can go to this gym, but I really don't know the functionalities of this equipment. So can I have a professional really show me and teach me how to build my strength, my physical strength? Really lifting weights was a sense of restoration and feeling rejuvenated and feeling strong within my own body, my muscles. And then I would also say, I made a new rule that every 6 months I go on a vacation. And that's just a pause from the world. It doesn't have to be, really expensive or really lofty, but I will invite, my village or my close circle of folks with me. And I just got to get to some water, like get me to a beach and just let me have time to just pause the world and just, go off the radar. And so for me, it's not just one thing. It's a multitude of things to really aid and foster my sense of replenishment.
How do you, and I'm so glad that you said all that. I mean, I can connect with both of them because I know that I need a variety of those things. And I have been, I'm going to get to the farm, EGM. I mean, I learned he was on a farm, I was like, hey, this is different because I know nature is just who I am. So, and, he's into horses too. So like that tipped it over for me. Horses and a farm. But one of the things is that in our organizations, and yes, well, there are things that we know that we, need to do. Of course, we want to make sure that our, whether it's working with children and youth, but also in working with adults. And a lot of the work that I do is actually working with the people who work with the youth and the children. So it's the adults that I work with. And I have seen, I'm trying to support their healing. And I know they are busy because they got their families, they have their own children, they really want to do it. And so I know about that secondhand trauma, that secondhand where they have taken on, they got their own stuff, but they have taken on what the students have. Because you're right, they're trying to lay it down and just do everything. And they can't do that. And so a part of it is, how do we support the adults to, and I like the word recognize, but to say, wherever you are, it is okay. It is okay to get a coach. It is okay to get a therapist. It is okay to have a mental health day. It is okay. because many times I think the organizational structures really want us to, and especially when the kids came back, it was just like, oh no, we gotta, we gotta deal with the gap and we gotta deal with this. And we didn't acknowledge that the adults actually had some issues around healing themselves. And so for each one of, how do we really support the adults to do that for themselves?
I love that. I'm going to jump in because that question, really had me think about one of the principals that I'm coaching who just purchased a home. She's engaged. She's planning for a wedding. She's running a transformation school in Los Angeles. And, she was stressed. We have our one-on-one sessions, and she was leaving the store with her a try on for her wedding gown. And there were things going on at the brand new home that they just purchased over Christmas break. And she was just lost. And I said, what's pressing you right now at work? And she said, my budget is due. I haven't sat down. I need to work on the budget. I said, ask your director if you can be the last principal whose budget is reviewed, because you work for the second largest district in the nation. There are other principals' budgets that they have to review. Let's just ask if yours can be the last to be reviewed and how much time you need to absolutely turn it in. I can't do that. I have a deadline. I said, just ask. Just ask. And she asked, and they said, oh, we won't even look at them for 2 weeks. So just get it in as soon as you can get it in. And so it's just really teaching them to advocate for themselves. Like, you wouldn't have gotten that 2-week grace if you wouldn't have just advocated for yourself and just asked the question. Now, everything isn't that simple, but we can't start with just teaching them that, everything pressing isn't pressing, and how can you eliminate some of the pressures that you're contending with by simply advocating for you to release some of that pressure. And so I just wanted to share that story as you were asking that question.
We've started in the district, we're supporting administrators. So we go see them every other week and we sit. And sometimes it's just a conversation, and sometimes we're studying data, but we sit. And we always open with a mindful moment. We get grounded, and then we close with something good. And so the response from the principals, and for us, it's a simple thing because this is what we do. But for them, it's a feeling of not being alone, not being out there by themselves. And because we built the relationship, there's a comfort. And so the guards aren't up, the guards are down because it's meant to support. So just that piece of support and acknowledgement has been really, really helpful. And I want to do my hands like this. You know how in the structure, like we push things. And so some things you have to, but when we don't have to, we don't. And they see that, and that has gone a long ways. I always go back to mindfulness, and guys, you're going to hear that from me a lot because I believe it will help. And just even not forcing an initiative on a principal and on their building. And I'm a recovered principal, and that's the only way I can describe it. I never want to live that life again because it's not for the faint at heart, but not forcing administrators to do what the system says you have to do has been so powerful. And I think it's a post-COVID thing, because we're so much more intentional and purposeful now than we were before. And it's not to say people don't feel pressure, because they do, but also welcoming people to take care of themselves. Dr. O'Leary, when you said, taking the time for yourself, our district superintendent, I don't know where she got the funds from, but she found a therapist. that all you have to do is call and make your appointment, and any of us can go, no questions asked. And so that spoke a lot to caring about her people. And we've opened like clinics, mental health clinics in the district. Not to say they're perfect, because it's hard to find good help, but the fact that we're doing that, trying to meet the needs of so many differently. And so those are a few things, but I'm not going to hog the mic.
I just want to say to those who are in attendance, if you have a question that you would love to ask one of our panelists, you can either put your question in the Q&A, which is a tab at the bottom of your screen, or you can ask your question in the chat. We definitely want to hear from you. I'm looking through and seeing that there are some power players there. I just want to acknowledge Dr. Norton's comment. She says, yes, Dr. Cobb. I work with youth here in Vallejo, and I am the dean here of the College of Education. We are putting together a proclamation to the city to talk about youth engagement as part of our safety budget, rather than just fire and policing. One thing I want included is the healing piece for students and adults as part of building safe spaces. Students are angry and are grieving loss during COVID-19 and racist unrest. In your organizations, how are you all really ensuring this happening and everyone is taking this time as a community? And I'm really interested in this question. I'll ask it again because, you know, Dr. O'Leary is now in the consulting space where she's working with institutions around equity. And Dr. Lightsey is still within the organization doing the work from within. And so, again, Dr. Norton asks, in your individual organizations, how are you really ensuring that this is happening, that space is given for healing, and that everyone is taking this time as a community?
One of the things we did, and yes, Dr. Cobb, you have to get out to the farm. I'm going to highlight the estate farm. And one of the things we did with the estate farm this past summer is that we had an event called the Equity Experience. And the Equity Experience was just a full day for any educator to come for free, to just have a day of wellness, a day of fellowship, a day of networking. We had food trucks. We had a healing circle that was led, and it was phenomenal. It was a drum circle, but it focused on healing. We had different speakers. And so what that has morphed into, which we are launching this summer, is the Principals Retreat. And the Principals Retreat is a time just for principals to retreat. And we're offering that space because oftentimes we focus on our end user, which is definitely our babies, right? We have schools so that we can educate the future generation, but we also have leaders who are responsible for making sure that there are systems, policies, programs, and curriculum in place that fosters the acceleration of our students and their achievement. And so we have to take care of our top leaders so that they're in a better position to support all of the different pieces that go on in the school system. And so we have opened up registration. We already have 30 principals signed up to come out for 3 days on the farm. I mean, just to rest. There isn't an agenda. The agenda is we're going to play games. We're going to dance under the stars. We are going to do some yoga. We are going to do some painting, a little gardening, but it's just 3 days. Again, to just pause the world, pause all the, mayhem going on your campus, to come and recenter yourself, get back to your core values, strengthen who you are so that you can be a holistic leader, to go back to your campuses and be the leader of warriors that your campus deserves. And so our organization is we're even looking for funding so we can open up this opportunities to more principals versus just the few that we are inviting for this summer. But we are trying to create a unique space and a unique opportunity for healing to take place with our school leaders.
Thank you for sharing that, because I'm taking that back. And last year we did a retreat, but we called it an unretreat. So what we didn't do was have the rigid structure of, okay, you got to do this on the first day, you got to do this. So we took it away and we played games and we listened to music and we did movement, but we were on campus. And so while we were in a pleasant environment, had good food, we weren't out in nature. And we did a mindful walk, but we weren't away from it all. So I'm going to take that back and we're going to find a farm somewhere.
Come on out to Sacramento. Come on out. We have a space for you. Come on out to Sacramento.
Okay. I'm going to put that out there because that's awesome. And just to do yoga, and we're doing self-care things in each building where we're opening calming spaces, working from the inside out and still being here. There are champions in the district, but they're, a few over here, a few over there. But one school has opened 2 calming spaces, one for the staff, one for the students. And I was able to get a grant for mental health. And I am now opening a calming space in every building. And every time I ask questions about it, the first thing I say is, well, what would you like? They don't really know. And then I say, well, I'm going to look into those massage chairs because, everybody knows about the massage chair that sits in the mall. And so every room will have one so that it provides a space of safety, comfort, and rest. And so it's little things, but that retreat piece for the leaders, I like that. I like that.
I've always been open to retreats because I do believe that there is something of value in like getting away from your usual work routine. As we both on the East Coast and West Coast are housed in universities, and what we do is teacher and leadership education, as well as the development of counselors and others. I have a question for both of you. Any recommendations or thoughts about, because I do believe we need to take this and incorporate this into teacher education, into leadership education, into how we prepare people who are going to work with our young people. And so what advice or ways, and I know that we have content. I mean, yes, we have content that we do want our people to know if they're going to go out and touch our young people. That's true. But I think a part of it is that we want their minds and we want their hearts and we want their essence to also be one in which that there is, we always know and always say, the relationship and connection with the student and the student's family is important. And yet, how do we as teacher education programs kind of infuse what we've talked about? That it's not an afterthought, but we infuse it into what we do.
So we often have student teachers, and they do come in strong with content. They understand content. And I'm not sure if college, and there are any social emotional learning courses in colleges that, but yet at the same time, I think it's important to infuse SEL into the curriculum, because before you feel, if you don't feel, you don't connect. I mean, and that's the truth. So if I were to recommend something from the ground level, it is to make sure that SEL is a major part of the coursework. And so even if you're just teaching what the competencies are, but how do you really looking at how to infuse it naturally into the classroom, into the curriculum, into the culture of the community, into the building. I think that would be helpful. I find that many adults don't want to look at themselves, and they're just, self-management is an issue, self-awareness is an issue. And so if we begin from the bottom up, I think that's helpful.
I love that. I agree. I'll add that I had an opportunity when I was in Los Angeles. I recently relocated to Houston. But when I was in Los Angeles, I had an opportunity to shadow Father Boyle, who was the founder of Homeboy Industries. You have to look up Homeboy Industries. It's an enterprise where he, as a priest, decided to create job opportunities for gang members, ex-gang members in his community. And so there are multiple enterprises, and it's called Homeboy Industries. And so I had an opportunity to shadow Father Boyle, just to speak with him, pick his brain. And one of the things he said, if you want to know about the community, you got to talk to the community. And oftentimes you're serving a body or a community of individuals, but you don't know their real stories. And so once you're familiar with their stories, it gives you a sense of understanding on how to support and how to incorporate their strengths and their assets to your school community at large. And so as a principal, I remember, taking what he said to heart and connecting with one of the OGs in our community. Now, this person's reputation, it wasn't something that was positive. He actually was one of the leaders of our community gangs, but he was an impressionable person. And I wanted him to talk to my staff. As unorthodox as that was, he knew the community inside out. And he also was someone who had major influence of people who was vandalizing the school and people who were, and what morphed from that was this sense of pride and protection of our school. He and his members decided that they were going to protect the campus. They understood that their children attended the campus and that they allowed this campus to be a hub of the community that was going to be sacred as a place for educating the youth. And so while I may have disagreed with his profession, we did have an understanding that one thing we agreed upon was the importance of the babies in that community. And once we understood his past stories, it morphed into us then providing opportunities for students on campus to get the gang prevention support and resources that they needed on our middle school campus. I say that to say, I believe that teacher preparation programs, leader education programs in higher institutions, we don't tap into the community as much as we should. I think that there are, we understand this idea of funds of knowledge, but do we really embrace it? Do we really look at pillars in the community, tap into connecting with them, bringing them to our campus, having them as speakers in our classrooms, so that educators have a broader sense of understanding of the needs of the community that they are going to be servicing. And I think that would eliminate many of the stressors, because once you have that connection with community, families, and parents, you have the common understanding and you have common language, you have common heart, then together you can achieve your goals much stronger. And so I really believe that if we're going to serve the community, we must first speak to the community and embrace and invite the community in our circles, and then be okay with going out to their circles as well. I'll stop right there because I can keep going. When it comes to community-based educators, I have a strong passion for community advocacy and activism.
I'm just looking at the time. We got about 10 minutes left. Dr. Cobb, do you have any other questions that you want to ask?
I like the idea, around community and around this connection. And I do think, as but what been said is that many times, as individuals, as adults, um, we say that we want to connect with our students and be there at the higher ed level, but also, adults to the children and youth in our communities. But understanding community is important, and they're not a monolith. I have recently been working in a part of this course taught by Dr. Nikki Elliott, who's at the University of Laverne. And I mean, she talks about, there's this language around, just ensuring that all of our children are calm. And she says, well, in different communities, calm mean different things. And so, but because we don't know the community in which we're working with, we don't know it on a personal level. We don't know it on, with its values or its beliefs, then in fact we kind of treat everybody the same. And so I would say that again, it is important that community is important, and that also the adults recognizing and being able to address their own kind of self-awareness. And so my last question is again, I think one of the things that brings us back, and the reason why this work is just so difficult is when we think we have it together, okay? So we went through the pandemic, we went through the social unrest, and then almost, things keep coming up. And whether it's social unrest, it continues to happen. Whether it's what's happening with the environment, and both the East Coast and the West Coast have gone through these storms just this week. Whatever it is, it's like we're, the various violence that's going on. We're always, kind of sucked back in to this kind of disequilibrium of like, okay, here we go again. And that tires us all out. And so, what can I think we all do to work with the adults that we come in contact with to help them, like, just, gain their center, gain their orientation of this is where I am, just so they can move forward, because it just seems that we're pushed and pulled, and we're trying to do better, and we can, but it's hard because we keep getting sucked back in. So what can help us with that?
I have a question, and maybe it's just a thought. So that the work of balance, and so even when we talk about community and giving, it's the balance. I think about many of the staff members that talk about, they have their families. So they may not live in the community, therefore they leave their work community and go to their home community. Yeah, what's the answer to that? Because we have to have freedom to live where we want, but how do you balance out your work community and your home community and your family? And I'm just always that's a complicated piece for me, because my work community is my community, but I don't live in the community, but I do all of my service. Everything that I do it in this community, but many of the staff members do not. Just a wondering.
And it's interesting that you bring that up. One of the things that it's interesting because I've learned this from my daughter, is that it was really during the pandemic that I stopped using the word balance. And I started using flow. And the reason is flow and integration is because balance implies that we're trying to make these things kind of equal. And at some points in our lives, my family has to, I got to flow with that because something's going on. Something's going on that is pulling me, and I got to deal with that. And then sometimes I'm working on a work project, whatever. And so it's not about balancing the two. It is about recognizing in this moment in time where I am and how I'm going to flow with what's going on. And sometimes, it is kind of an up and down, but it is, recognizing that I want to first be able to recognize what is my priority at this moment in time, to do what I can, and also to understand that what has happened before, I need to integrate it into where I am now. It's about, it is about integrating it in, and, and living with that. And so I don't have an answer to the, but those are some of the things that I think I've tried to, address of late.
Awesome. Well, we always like to give our panelists the last word of the day. But before I do that, I just want to remind folks that our next meeting will be March 15th, 2023, again from 12:30 p.m. on the West Coast and 3:30 p.m. on the East Coast. We will be looking at community workers for our next installment of Deep Equity Now. And we have 3 dynamic gentlemen that are going to be participating on that panel. We have Michael Mills from New Jersey. He is a transformative leader out there that is doing great work with our youth in the New Jersey area. We have Mr. Barry Akias, who is from Sacramento, a transplant from New York. So he's come from New York to Sacramento, and he's doing great work in the Sacramento community, working with our youth. And then we have Mr. Stevante Clark. Some of you may remember 5 years ago, maybe I think it might have been a little bit over 5 years ago, his brother, Stephon Clark, was murdered by the police here in Sacramento, California. And since then, he has turned his pain into activism, and he is on the scene of any major police brutality issue all over the country. And so he'll be on our panel in 2 weeks as well. So you don't want to miss our community workers installment of this series. But with that said, Dr. O'Leary, Dr. Lightsey, you all have the floor.
I'll end with this. First of all, it's been a delight to have this conversation with real colleagues in the field who share like-mindedness, like passion, like heart. And so thank you all again for the opportunity to be on this panel and to have this great discussion with you. I will end with this. I'll say that, the road to healing, the road to healing and the road to recovery, I'm going to re-emphasize that it's in my book, chapter 1, and it's really understanding your core values, getting back, resetting, getting back to who you are, and then allowing that to be your guide to the decisions that you make for yourself, your career, your family, and your community. I'll share a quick story. Not too long, maybe a week or so ago, I think it was absolutely last week, I was invited to speak at an event where there was going to be, it was a culminating event for future and aspiring administrators. They were receiving their credential. And I was asked that if I was going to present, that I could not say the word equity. And then my bio, I had to take out the word BIPOC. And, I sat with that and I wrestled with that for a little bit. I said, there are other ways to say equity. I can say justice or fairness. And there are more things to me than, the community of color that I've serviced. And after much thought and reflection and really owning my own core values, I said, this isn't for me. This isn't the gig for me. And so I think it's really understanding who you are, saying no when it's time to say no, knowing that everything isn't for you. And here's a quote that I love to live by. I love to be myself when I'm 100% me 100% of the time, unapologetically. And if you can't accept all of me, then you don't need a piece of me. And so that's just the piece that I've landed on. And that is definitely substantiating my healing process.
Thank you.
And I know we're right there on the mark. And I'll just end with just a few words. And I have a phrase that I practice every day in every way. I get to start all over again. And I believe that. And I will say it moment to moment.
I think
Thank you both.
Dr. O'Leary quoted me. Was that my quote, Dr. O'Leary? I think you stole my quote.
I remixed it and now it's mine.
Talk about integration.
Thank you both. I truly enjoyed this conversation. As I said before we started, I tried to get out the way because I was surrounded by I was gonna say dynamics. I don't know the word. I was just surrounded by powerfulness. So I appreciate all of you. Again, we hope that you all are able to tap in with us in 2 weeks. Until then, everyone have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.